Hi everyone, and welcome to liveArgyl's virtual tea party in celebration of this year's Book Week Scotland. I'm so glad that you can all join us. We're here today with Scottish author Samantha Young. Samantha is a New York Times bestselling author who's known and published in 30 countries around the world. She's an incredibly proud Scot, and she's here today to talk about her life as an author in general and where she gets her inspiration and her support from. It's been a joy working with Sam and getting to know her through this process. Um, and I'm really happy to say that you can go to our online library Borrow Box and download some of Sam's books. Our online library has a great selection, a varied selection of all sorts of different authors and all sorts of different genres, and it's free to library members. If you're not a library member, you can just go to the liveArgyll website and click on the link for ebook borrowing. Without any further ado, here's Samantha Young. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Samantha Young, and I'm a New York Times bestselling author of 40 plus books. And I'm so happy and honoured to have been invited to join you all in your virtual tea party this year for Book Week Scotland. So I hope you are settled in, you have your cup of tea at the ready, because I'm just going to tell you a little bit about my writing story, and hopefully it's an interesting one for you. So, where to begin? Well, as they say at the beginning, and my love of books and writing started from a very young age. It would be my mum and dad that started this. They kick-started it with one of my first memories. I don't know what age I was, I just know I was very young, and I remember coming home from preschool to a big sack of books. There was The Hungry Caterpillar, Jemima Puddle Duck, and a big book of nursery rhymes that I adored and had all the way through high school and into uni. It sadly got lost in a house move when I was at university. But yeah, it was just, that was my first memory of books, and my mum and dad read to me all the time, and I just adored storytelling. But it really became a passion and a really part of who I am when I was 7 years old, and I have two big brothers. Sadly, the October before I turned 7, my eldest brother was killed, and it was a very young age to go through something like that, and to grieve and to watch your family grieving, watch your parents and your brother grieving. And books became the ultimate escapism for me. And it wouldn't be long after that I picked up The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. And I had never read anything like it. I loved Roald Dahl and Enid Blyton, and they were wonderful writers, but I had never experienced anything like Narnia before. And I just, it was so magical. It was so unbelievably magical, and I needed something like that then. And I remember I had a wardrobe in my bedroom, very small little girl's wardrobe, and I think my dad had either wallpapered it or covered it in stickers. I can remember white clouds and rainbows over the doors, and I used to go into it behind my clothes and press the back of the wardrobe, hoping that somehow Narnia would appear. And that's the joy of books and storytelling and imagination. So from there, I wanted to experience more books like that, and I began to write my own stories to do it. Short stories throughout school, loved whenever we were asked to do creative writing at primary school, and English became one of my favourite subjects at high school. I wrote poems and short stories, but I was always very shy about it. I'm a very shy person, an extremely shy child and teenager. But that was part of my way of expressing myself. At high school, the storytelling angle changed. I still wanted to be a storyteller, but I met a teacher who is one of those teachers who is just a phenomenal teacher. He was the first teacher I really felt who saw who I was and saw my humour and my imagination. And he was actually my film teacher, Mr. Innes. I dedicated one of my books, Fall from India, a Place, to Mr. Innes because he was just a spectacular teacher and very enthusiastic and supportive. And he introduced me to one of my favourite writers of all time, Angela Carter. I still have the book and the letter that he gave me of her short story collection. And from there, I went on to read everything by her. I think she was a different kind of storyteller from what I had been reading. And she led me to Margaret Atwood and Milan Kundera and writers like that. So he was a special teacher, and I just kind of expressed my storytelling through making films at high school and decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go on and study film and either be a script writer or a film editor, because editing, which I discovered as a writer, is a huge part of making a story better. So I went on to Stirling University, very passionate and excited about becoming involved in film. And it didn't quite work out that way for me. I didn't enjoy my courses. I wasn't staying on campus. I lived nearby because I'm from Falkirk and I was going to Stirling Uni, and I just wasn't getting that full student experience. And I was too young to realise that that's probably what was missing at Stirling Uni, was, you know, making friends through student residencies. And anyway, long story short, I decided to leave Stirling and take a year out to do work experience and make some money, and then go back to university to do a proper degree. And I thought a proper degree was in history. That was my practical move from filmmaking to history. I just really wanted to work with Historic Scotland. I love touring Scotland, and I love listening to the guides who worked at Historic Scotland and all the different jobs is actually involved in Historic Scotland, from events management for weddings at Stirling Castle and all these different things. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Edinburgh, study history, and this will be my route. But when I was at uni, I stayed at residencies there, and it definitely made a huge difference to my university experience. Lifelong friends, brilliant time. But I started really writing when I was at Edinburgh University, and it was actually young adult urban fantasy fiction, which was huge at the time because of books like Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. And it was the first full-length novel I'd written while I should have been focusing on my history degree. And I just realised I wasn't happy. And it's a really difficult thing to realise when you've spent so much money and energy and time trying to get a 4-year degree. And I had tried throughout university to get jobs with Historic Scotland, and for whatever reason just didn't get there. So I decided to leave university with just my bachelor's in humanities. But I had this book I'd written. I was working on the second one. I got work with a temp agency doing administrative work, because that's what I had done during my work experience year. And it was really a low point in my life. I moved back in with my parents. I was struggling financially. I had all this student debt. And books once again became my escapism. I was reading tons of books. I was writing this young adult urban fantasy series, and I decided to try and get it published. I had nothing left to lose at this point, and I sent off the first book, the first 3 chapters, to different publishers and got agents, and got a few rejection letters. Didn't even get any word back from most of them. So I decided to use what was considered then vanity press, where they will print it into a paperback for me. And I did that. And while that was going on, I was still working until I wasn't. I lost my position at the temp agency. They didn't have any work for me going forward. And I was trying to get a job. I was applying for all these different administrative jobs, that I didn't even really want, but I needed to. And I kept writing and reading and discovered an author called Amanda Hawking, who was writing young adult urban fantasy series. And she was self-publishing through Amazon. Kindle Direct Publishing, it was called. I had never heard of it. And the reason I decided to really look into her was not just because I enjoyed her books, but because her books were only 99 pence in ebook on Amazon. I was like, this is mad. Why are these so cheap? So I went to her website and I discovered that she was self-publishing, and I started to research how to do it. And I spent a couple of months researching it while I was writing. I learned how to do my own cover art, how to format my books for ebook, how to do promotion, to market it, and to reach out to bloggers and book reviewers. And come February 2011, I published the first book. And then the month after, I published the second, and the month after that, the third. And I was working with all these bloggers and doing all my marketing and promotion and making graphics and teasers. Everything was online. And this kept going. And I got offered a job, a permanent position. I had been working with the police in the administrative department of police as a temp months before, and my boss had really liked me, and she got in contact with me and said, you know, there's actually a full-time position for you. And I was in a conundrum because slowly but surely my books were starting to sell. It wasn't at a point where I could do it full time, but I could see that it could be. Amanda Hawking was doing it, a few other writers were doing it. They'd left their jobs and were writing full time. And I had been working harder than I've ever worked in my life. You could ask my mum and dad. I stayed in their little second bedroom in their flat, and it was my office, and I was in there working 16 hours days. I kid you not, writing constantly, formatting, promoting, marketing, everything. It was just non-stop hard work, but I was enjoying it. I think that's the only way you get through working those kind of hours is if you're really enjoying it. And so when my boss, who I had loved that job, it was a great job and she was a wonderful boss, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because the practical, sensible thing to do is say yes. And it was actually my dad. My mom and dad have always been the most supportive parents on the planet, and have always encouraged me to reach for my dreams, basically. It sounds cheesy, but they've always encouraged me and always believed that I could do it. And it was my dad, and he said, I don't think you should take the job. I think you should keep doing what you're doing because I think you're onto something. Because they were just as excited as I was. I remember there were nights I'd come running through to the living room, they were watching the television, and I'd be like, oh my God, I got 800 sales this week. And it would go on like that. I mean, the first time it was like 7 sales, and then it was 70 sales, and it was going up. And so, you know, I hero worship my dad, and I thought, well, if he thinks I can do it, then I'm going to take the risk, and I'm going to turn down this job and keep doing this. And it worked out for me because it was August 2011, so I started in February 2011, and come August 2011, I was making more money than I'd made in my admin job annually. I published 3 more books by that point, maybe 4 more books. I told you I was working hard. These were full-length novels, and I was able to go to the tax man and say I'm self-employed now, which was extremely exciting and scary at the same time, as it is for anyone who's self-employed, because you constantly have to keep working at it to make sure you're getting by. So a year would pass from August 2011. By then I published 3 young adult urban fantasy series. So I had a quadrilogy, and I had a quadrilogy and 2 trilogies, and a standalone fantasy novel, and a short story that I had published. And I was working on the quadrilogy. I think I was on book 3 for that, when 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James just exploded around the world and became a worldwide phenomenon. And although I was not an erotica writer, I had been told by a lot of my readers who read both fantasy and contemporary romance that they loved the romantic subplots in my books, and had I ever considered crossing into contemporary romance. And I'd never read it, so I decided to download a few books, and I loved how it was all about character development, because that's my favourite part of writing, is character development and taking a character from one place and taking them through a journey to the end of the novel. And I decided, well, if I was going to do it, it wouldn't be 50 Shades of Grey, although my publishers would go on to market it that way here in the UK. It wouldn't be 50 Shades of Grey, but what E.L. James and 50 Shades of Grey did for the romance market was bring so many more readers to it, which was really exciting. So I decided I was going to do it, but it would be personal, because I wanted the book to be relatable and have real kind of grit and meat to the story for the main character, my heroine. So I wrote On Dublin Street. And On Dublin Street is really about, as the tagline says, haunted by loss, freed by passion. And it was really taking the grief that I had, had become quite a big part of my life, actually, because I think it had happened so young, and because obviously it was my brother, and kind of channeling that into something, and it became therapy for me, which made the book have so much more meaning to me. Joss, there's so much of me in Joss who had a lot of guards and defences up, which I did as well. And it's really the story of this American girl who has lost her family when she was a teenager, and her mother was Scottish, and she has dual citizenship because of that. So she decides to come to Edinburgh Uni to be a student. And when she graduates, she is looking for a new flatmate, and she finds this girl called Ellie who lives on Dublin Street, and ends up getting into a relationship with Ellie's big brother, and how the two of them, not just Braden, the hero, but how Ellie and the entire family start to break down all these walls that Joss has put up. And I honestly didn't know what to expect when I had written it. I wrote it, I published it in August 2012, and it literally changed my life. I knew I sensed something was happening with it because the reviews and how much I was seeing it online, people sharing it. But I think I have a terrible memory, and I really should have written these things down in a diary. But I think it was probably 2 weeks into it being on sale, and my family had started texting me because they were checking its ranking in the US on Amazon. And I woke up one morning, and my brother, my mum, my auntie, my best friends, they all texted me and said, "Do you know you've broken the top 100 in the US on Amazon?" And I couldn't believe it. I'd never done that before. I had never broken the top 100. It was extremely difficult to do it. And I went and checked my sales, and I couldn't believe how many copies I was selling. And from that point on, it just was so exciting. Every day, my friends and family were texting me like, "You're at number 80, you're at number 65, you're at number 40. And we were like, how is this happening? This is insane. And I started to get emails from publishers and agents who were interested in talking to me. But I had an agent in mind who I'd already queried this agency in New York and was rejected for one of my urban fantasy books. But there was a different agent at the agency who she dealt with women's fiction. And so I contacted her and said, "Look, I'm number 16 on Amazon US, and I'm seeking representation, and I'm really interested in talking to you." And this was because this was an agency that worked with independently published authors and knew what was important to them, because we were making more money as self-published authors. We were making 70% royalties compared to 10 to 25% royalties we'd make with a traditional publisher. And so I signed with Lauren, and she is the most wonderful agent. I've been with her since 2012. And Lauren got on Dublin Street into an auction with the 6 biggest publishers in New York. And while this was all going on Dublin Street hit #1 in the US, and I knocked J.K. Rowling's Casual Vacancy off the top spot, which is still the most surreal thing that has ever happened. And I was selling nearly 10,000 copies of On Dublin Street a day, which is crazy. So it went to auction, and Penguin, who are now Penguin Random House, Penguin bought it for 7 figures. It was a 2 big deal for this one and the second book in the series. And that completely changed my life. Of course it did. The tax man took a huge chunk, but it changed my life because I was able to buy a house. I was able to pay off my mum and dad's mortgage, pay off my brother's mortgage, help with his wedding in Italy, and just, we'd never had that kind of breathing space financially as a family ever. And it was just a wonderful time in our lives. Money obviously isn't everything, we know that better than any family, but it really was just a great time for us, and gave us all a bit of a head start again. And obviously it was just wonderful to have all these readers, because On Dublin Street went on to be published in 30 countries. And my books are still popular in a lot of these countries, which means I have readers from all over the world, and I've been able to travel since then. The last 8 years I've been to the States, I think 11 times, to different states in the US, for book signings. I've been to Croatia, Poland, Germany, Australia, and I hope to visit more places, to meet more of my readers around the world. So yeah, it's just been absolutely life-changing, and I have friends from all over the world, especially the US now, and I've managed to go on to, I now publish young adult contemporary fiction. This is one of them, and this is actually set in Edinburgh as well, in Portobello, The Fragile Ordinary. We've moved on to kind of more rom-com with my publisher in the US. And then I'm still self-publishing as well. I self-publish quite a few series, because it's just such a different market now. I mean, I think when I started with Kindle Direct Publishing, there was a couple of million book titles on Amazon, and now there's over 8 million book titles. So it's very hard to get your books seen now, and that's why I enjoy being what we call a hybrid author so much, because I still publish with Berkeley in the US, and I self-publish, and I've gone on to co-write, which I never thought I'd do, but I co-wrote this book, Outmatched, which is a romantic comedy with a brilliant New York Times bestselling author, Kristen Callahan, and she lives in the States. She lives just outside Washington, DC, and that's just amazing. You know, I'm just this kid from Falkirk in Scotland, and I not only you know, living my dream job, but I have these amazing peers who are my friends now, who, you know, I've met my heroes. I've been to conferences in the States where my authors that I absolutely love their books have been right there, and some have signed my books for me, and some have become friends, and that's just so surreal, but wonderful. And that is the joys of books, really, isn't it? And so now here we are, and honestly I'm working harder than ever. As I said, the market has changed. There are so many other independently published books out there, and I a lot of people who don't know about the industry will say, oh, it must be brilliant to sit in your pajamas all day and write. And I'm very Scottish and very polite, and I'm always like, well, you're wrong. I'm going to explain why you're wrong. I probably spend maybe a third of my time actually writing now. So I need a routine. So I write in the morning, I get up, I take care of my doggies, and then I try to write 2,000 to 3,000 words in the morning, and then come back after taking the dogs for their walk and all of this and having a bit of lunch. And I spend the rest of the day either editing, formatting, writing promotional work for my publisher or for my own publicist that I hire, um, dealing with social media. Social media is a massive part of this industry. So, I like to keep in contact with my readers as much as possible because I wouldn't have what I have without them. So a lot of time is eaten up by replying to readers on social media, um, creating doing little promotions and giveaways and networking with other authors on social media, and accounting and administration, because taxes, all these things. So it really is, when people say, it must be fun to just sit about and write all the time. It's not. I'm running a business. It's become a business, and that's what happens when you're self-published. But I'm very lucky that it's a business that I absolutely love and adore, and that I can put myself into my stories, that hopefully people enjoy. And this year has been one of the toughest, in modern memory, and I hope that books have been a great escape for people, when we've been in lockdown under restrictions. Yeah, books have been my escape, and I hope my books have been an escape for other people as well during this tough time. And yeah, so I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I hope you've enjoyed listening to my story. I hope I haven't left anything out. I probably have. As I said, I have the worst memory. I have to write everything down for book series. I have spreadsheets and everything because I remember who was in what book and who did this and did that. So I hope you've remembered the most important points of my writing journey story, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. And I wish you a wonderful virtual tea party and lots of social distance elbow hugs. Keep safe and be well, and have a lovely Christmas.